Chris McKay, you directed the Lego Batman movie, the first after the Lego movie, the first in the series of the modern Lego movies that we're seeing now. I was curious, how did you come to work on the Lego movie with Lord and Miller on that? How did you come to start working with them?
I had worked on a show called Robot Chicken. I was the producer, director, editor of that show, and I through I ended up meeting the production designer of Cloudy, Justin Thompson, who's a really great production designer, and he and I worked together for a minute on a pilot at Disney, and I really liked working with him. He liked working with me, and he recommended me to Chris and Phil. Chris and Phil were about to do 21 and then ultimately 22 Jump Street, and they needed a co-director on the Lego movie, and we sat down, met. I had actually they wanted to do obviously the movie in a stop motion style, and because I'd been on Robot Chicken, Moral Oral, Titan Maximum, I had a lot of experience with stop motion, and so I kind of quickly became the co-director, animation director, co-editor, and occasional voice performer, background voice performer of the Lego movie. And yeah, it was really great. They at the time they'd lost their green light, and I worked with them and the studio to get the green light of the movie back. They didn't know what to do with the studio didn't necessarily know what to do with the movie, and they wanted Emmett to have like depth in his mouth and to have more anatomical features. They wanted to sort of change the way the minifig looked, and I basically came up with this idea that Emmett should audition for the movie, and we did it as an animation test. Emmett kind of doing this black box audition where he comes in with a script and has to engage the directors on the other side of the camera. It's as though it's one of these things where it's you can only see the actor black box, and we would throw out things for Emmett to, they'd say, try it again, do it faster, be funny, be angry, do it while you're crying. And so Emmett basically pled for his case to be the design that we all know and love. And that convinced the studio, yes, you can, because I think their concern was people aren't going to identify with this character or care about this character. And that was just a way for us to show, look, you will fall in love with this character and do that. So that was kind of my first assignment coming on the movie, was to figure out a way to convince the studio that the movie was going to be emotional, that these characters are going to be emotional, and that we can do the stop motion style and people will think it's charming. And that the movie was going to be a combination of Henry Selick and Michael Bay, as though Henry Selick and Michael Bay were two 10-year-olds living next to each other, and we're going to combine the charm of a Henry Selick thing with like the super cool action and stakes of a Michael Bay movie and shoot it like a Michael Bay movie. And so I did an animatic with Metallica music and things like that, and that sort of showed off a chase scene with Emmett chasing after Emmett Wildstyle chasing after Emmett's mom at the time, who was kidnapped by President Business's forces, and that was sort of the original version of the movie. But yes.
So I'm wondering, was there any when you signed on as the director of this movie, Lego Batman, did you feel any pressure in taking over where Lord and Miller had left off?
Yeah, it's a tough act to follow. Those guys are great, and the way we got away with some stuff in the Lego movie was to under-promise and over-deliver, which you can't do in success. So I'm a huge Batman fan. I've been a huge Batman fan my whole life. So the opportunity to do a different kind of Batman movie, the kind of thing you maybe can't do in a live action movie or another animated movie, that was really appealing to me. And so although I had a lot of fears of living up to what we created on the first movie, I was also really excited about the opportunity and knew that this was sort of a big swing to take to try to make a movie that about Batman that took the point of view that Batman had been around for 78 years and kind of doing the same thing over and over, the way we see the same stories told, origin stories, and the same, crime alley scene and stuff like that, kind of told in the same way over and over again. And we wanted to sort of go, well, what happens if Batman was actually on a mission to solve his real problem? There's no upside to other movies maybe to do that, but for our movie, we could maybe take that as the central premise of the film.
So you had mentioned earlier that you came from Robot Chicken, that you had worked on that show for a while. Coming from Robot Chicken, and I'm sure there are several answers possibly to this question, but I'm just looking for what's the one biggest plus to doing computer animation over stop motion?
Well, computer animation is an iterative process, where stop motion, what's both great and difficult about stop motion is that you have to, you get one take. And so you as a filmmaker working with the animator, you have to, there's very little redo. It happens at bigger budgets, but it's expensive. Very expensive. Whereas in animation on computers, you can tweak things, you can fine tune things, you can go really granular and get really nerdy about the performance and do it again and again and again. So and that's what's great about stop motion, because it really is, even though there's great filmmakers that work in stop motion, it really is the animator's medium. And the animators, I'm as a director, I'm more of the producer of what the animator does. We can talk about all of these different kinds of feelings and what the intent of the moment is and things like that. But the animator comes in and really breathes life into it, and not to take anything away from the animators that work in CG, but that is a more collaborative environment. And there's many animators I work with in CG that nail it, and also I've been incredibly inspired, especially by my teams that I worked with on the Lego Movie and Batman. Incredibly inspired by the artists. I love working with Animal Logic specifically on these movies because they have such a diverse and robust team of animators that have all of these different influences and all these different points of view and touchstones that I don't have, because they've come from Russia or Japan or Europe or wherever, and so they've got this great background, and I can talk about the movies that I've seen, and they can talk about the filmmakers that they are inspired by, and we really collaborate in a way that breathes life into these characters and makes the movie better than what either one of us would have brought to the table. And that's what's great about CG, is that you can really truly get down and collaborate and organically build a performance or a scene or ideas and explode ideas in mid. You can sort of hit an epiphany, or we can all together hit an epiphany for where we're at in the story, and then kind of build off of that in the way that you can when you're working with improv actors. I look at the CG animators I worked with very much like collaborating with the actors that I work with in the voiceover booth. It is like improvisation or jazz, where you're kind of riffing off of each other.
Well, actually, that brings me to one of my next questions. When I've seen the Lego Batman movie twice, and my favorite thing is during the credits, as I'm looking at the cast and seeing in roles that you may not have realized, all these comedians that are used in a lot of the smaller roles that are maybe that don't have that much screen time. Jason Mantzoukas, Conan O'Brien, and I'm blanking on all the others, but there's Doug Benson even.
Yeah, Doug Benson, Ricky. Yeah.
You have them in there. Where did the idea come from to use these people who come from either stand-up or sketch comedy or improv comedy, to use them to fill out the supporting cast?
Well, I mean, I'm a big fan of Jason Mantzoukas, of Kate and Ricky, of Conan, and Doug Benson. So honestly, there was probably a selfish motivation on my part to just want to cast people that I liked and that I wanted to work with that I thought were really cool and funny. Kate and Ricky and Jason were also in the. We brought them by for like a writers, workshop day where we sort of kicked around ideas on the movie in general. And then, and since they were actors, I wanted to, bring them in to just do a performance. I think that, there's jokes that Doug Benson's version of Bane scores in a way that maybe somebody else wouldn't. I think Conan O'Brien is somebody I'm just a huge fan of, and he really liked the Lego Movie, and I thought, well, let's at least cast him as something, even though it's like it's a small part. He gets one great joke in there, and so to me it was more of a selfish thing. I love Doug Benson because I love his podcast. I love Jason Mantzoukas on The League and How Did This Get Made? Things like that. So, and I love Kate and Ricky's, music, and just, these people are inspirational to me. And when we couldn't get Danny DeVito and Arnold Schwarzenegger and Jim Carrey to play Penguin and the Riddler and Mr. Freeze, when the studio wasn't necessarily going to do that, I thought, well, I'm going to cast people that I really like in these roles and might do it fun. I always thought that the Tom Hardy Bane thing would be a fun thing to do. So Doug Benson was on my mind the minute that we started doing the outfit, where I wanted to sort of combine the comic book version of Bane with the Tom Hardy version of Bane, and I wanted the crazy Tom Hardy voice to play a part in the movie. It just seemed like that's just a fun. I'm always looking, for opportunities where you can do, we operate a little bit like the airplane model of movie making, where you want to have all sorts of different kinds of jokes throughout the movie, and having the Tom Hardy Bane just be a sort of a one-off joke idea seemed like a lot of fun.
Was there any character that you found was particularly difficult to cast?
Well, until we hit on Rosario, Barbara Gordon, I thought was a difficult character to cast. Joker was difficult. I guess probably why. Batman. Batman's got a great deep bench as far as the rogues gallery go, but diversity is probably an issue in the Batman. When you look at the lineup of Batman, there's a lot of white guys, and it sort of seemed like fun to try to mix that up a little bit and bring. I also sort of looking at like Barbara Gordon, like why not cast somebody who could actually play, Batgirl in real life, like cast somebody who's got a great voice and is fun. Rosario is a writer herself, as well as working with Chris Rock and just working with a lot of comedy people, and is great, and just her voice has just such a nice charm to it. But also, she could play a live action Batgirl credibly, without fail. Actually, all of our, Zach could be a great live action Joker, a really fun, weird, dangerous, and vulnerable take on Joker in a weird way. So I think looking for, I think Barbara Gordon, Batgirl, Joker, those were the ones that were really sort of like, and plus Joker has had so many actors that have, done like, indelible performances, that are just like, you can't go wrong with Cesar Romero, Jack Nicholson, Heath Ledger, obviously, Mark Hamill. So many people have played amazing Jokers that it was really hard to find somebody who was going to be able to do something different, and it could also do, the improv and have an interesting voice, an interesting take on it. And I think, again, Zach's dangerous vulnerability is exactly why, to me, he was the perfect Joker and kind of perfect. He's just such a. I mean, his voice is just. I don't know. There's just a sweetness and a sincerity and an earnestness, and he's not afraid to go for it. I loved working with him. He's great.
No, he's actually one of my favorite performers, and I loved his Joker in Lego Batman. He was so great. One cast member we haven't talked about is interesting is that Ray Fiennes plays Alfred.
Yeah.
But one of his other characters, Voldemort, was a character in the movie as well.
Did he play Voldemort in a movie?
Yeah, I know. I just found this out. And but Voldemort in this movie was voiced by Eddie Izzard.
Yeah.
Was there Eddie was like Ray Fiennes pissed when he saw that he wasn't going to get to play his other character?
I brought it up so many times to the studio. That was one of my things. I mean, there was many things like that where there's like fun things that are fun for the people who are going to appreciate these jokes that sometimes people didn't get. The Billy D. Williams thing, people didn't get until it came out later. There's like, oh, look at this. They're fulfilling the promise of the Tim Burton movie. Wow, that's cool. They cast Billy D. Williams. People at first didn't understand any of that stuff. And unfortunately, that was a battle with Rafe that I lost because the studio, I think, was concerned about getting too close to the. J.K. has been very generous with us as far as like allowing us to use Voldemort, allowing us to use Dumbledore and Lego Movie and that sort of thing. They might have been concerned about the relationship there. And ironically, Eddie Izzard is a friend of J.K. Rowling's, and I thought did a great job, and I've always loved him. So he's another one of those people that I was like, oh, great. Well, okay. Well, if you don't want to go, this way, then let's go with this guy because he's amazing. But yeah, it was one of those things where I don't think everyone saw what was important and could be fun about casting Rafe in both parts for the movie. So
we are an awards website, and we're now in the heat of awards season. Everything's coming up. New York Film Critics just announced today. One of the biggest shocks in recent years at the Oscars was the Lego Movie getting left out undeservedly. It was so good, and it just blew everyone away when it came out. And then when it got snubbed, it was like it was heartbreaking, and it was awful that it didn't get in. If you get in for Lego Batman, will you feel like you've gotten some sort of retribution if you get nominated?
Retribution. That's great. That's a great way to put it. Yeah, I guess no movie really. It's hard to say because like there's so many movies that deserve that every year there are movies that deserve to get nominated, especially in animation, where you've got a window of there's 5 slots to reward an animated movie, essentially. And whereas other movies, Suicide Squad can win an Academy Award, for makeup or effects or something like that. Sound. I can't remember what it was. And deserves, deservedly so, can be nominated and win something like that. So there's lots of opportunities to nominate a broad spectrum of movies in live action, but animation gets 5 slots. And there are many, 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 many movies, animated movies that are made every year at all different scales that are touching and beautiful and have really sincere themes and often sometimes serve an audience that isn't being served sometimes by mainstream movies that don't get recognition. So it's hard to say like that the Lego Movie deserved to be recognized from our point of view, or maybe I'm not necessarily speaking for Chris and Phil, just myself, but I think they would agree that allow me to speak for Chris and Phil and me. There's a lot of movies out there that really aren't seen and aren't recognized. We were very fortunate that we were able to make a movie that reached people, that touched people, that was able to spawn sequels, that showed that you don't have to make these movies. Don't necessarily need to be cynically made movies if you're making a movie that has like a sort of a brand and things like that. That these movies too can be earnest and sincere, and that earnestness and sincerity isn't necessarily something that I think people sometimes shy away from that because they get afraid of things like that. And we were always like, no, if we want to, we can be silly, we can have fun, we can also be emotional, and the movie can be a big tent as far as what we want to accomplish, and bring the audience on a roller coaster ride, a full roller coaster ride of a movie. And
well,
so to me, yeah, I just feel like we got what we wanted out of that process. That people saw it, that people were moved by it, that I'm glad, and I hope for we have artists that work on these movies that work very, very hard and very, very long hours to make the films that we do, and with Batman, to make a movie as fast as we do. So for them, I would love for their efforts to be recognized, because a lot of the same people that worked on the Lego movie worked on Lego Batman, and I would love for their work to be recognized on a grand scale. But I feel like the fact that we the letters that we get from people who were moved by the movies that we make, I think, is the real reward.
Well, Chris, we do wish you the best in everything. I'm really hoping that a nomination comes through because the movie was fantastic, and I know a lot of people liked it. So we wish you the best this award season. Thanks so much for talking to us.
Thank you. It's been great. Thanks very much.